here at Iowa Central. So just a reminder for those of you during the presentations, if you could keep yourself muted, that would be awesome. If you do have questions, you can absolutely unmute yourself and ask our instructors. Also, you can write it in the chat box. Mackenzie and I are going to be following that. Let's see here. I think that's everything, Kenzie. So we can go ahead and get started. Let's see, Jennifer, Kara, Shelly, whoever, whatever the plan is, go ahead.
All right. Well, my name's Jennifer Dutcher. I'm one of the visual arts instructors here at Iowa Central, as well as the coordinator. I have been teaching for about 18 years, K-12. So I will be talking to you a little bit about careers in the visual arts, and then looking at lots of different ways you could potentially use an art degree. Like I said, I've been teaching, well, I should say K-12 and then post-secondary as well for a long time. So I've thought I'd just share with you a little bit of everything. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. All right. Okay, so today Kara and I are going to talk a little bit about careers you could potentially go into in the visual arts. Looks like it's still loading on my end. Can you all see it? Okay. All right, so I'm going to begin by just kind of walking you through how you could potentially go into the visual arts or a creative career, what they look like, kind of what that entails, and then Kara's going to walk you through a really great resource in just a little bit. Okay, so this industry typically is for people that feel as though they are a creative individual. And if that's something that you think fits kind of the description of who you are as a person, great. But it also fits for individuals that perhaps feel as though they are an analytical person, kind of a thinker, someone who is curious. And the reason I mention my kind of career and how I've been teaching for a long time is I've constantly been observant in terms of lifelong learning and learning in all ages. And I think that is something that if you go into the visual arts, you have to kind of consider that you will constantly be learning new things in the field. It's not like you learn how to do it and then you're just done. So it's definitely for people that are problem solvers, thinkers, people that are expressive, like to communicate, and like I mentioned, people that consider themselves lifelong learners. If you enjoy learning new things and trying new things, this is likely a good field for you to go into. All right, so let's look a little bit at careers, and I'm not going to go over all of these, but I just want to show this slide to kind of show you that the sky is the limit. This is just a glimpse at what the creative industry looks like, and how a career in the arts could potentially land you in any one of these columns. So I'm going to focus on just a couple. And like I mentioned, what I ended up going into was art education. So I studied studio art as well as art history. My emphasis was actually in metalworking, which is one of the careers that was on here. And initially I thought that's what I was going to do for a living. But anyway, again, I have gone into education. I also worked extensively in museums. So even though I'm in the visual arts, I kind of can put myself in several different categories. I also do lots of different graphic design work. I teach graphic design here, but I also do lots of promotional materials and things like that. I work with lots of nonprofits in the community and work a lot in graphic design. So I just mentioned that because a lot of times you don't always land in one little category per se. You might dabble in a little bit of everything. Kara, who you'll meet in just a minute, she works also as a studio artist. So she has exhibitions of her work, etc. So again, she doesn't land in just one of those little fields. A lot of times we kind of hop around depending on what it is that we're working on, what kind of project we're doing. So I thought I'd focus on just a couple of different professions you could potentially go into. And this will also get touched on in a little bit when you meet Rusty, but filmmaking. So a lot of times filmmaking is maybe an art medium that you may not think of as a medium, but the filmmaking is most certainly an artistic medium, and many students study filmmaking while they are studying visual arts. Filmmaking, of course, can land you indoors, outdoors. It kind of depends on the type of films that you might potentially be getting into. Something that I thought I would mention is commercial designs. That's another one of those artistic fields that you could potentially go into. Commercial designers are oftentimes individuals that design things for commercial use. And a lot of times we don't even realize these things surround us on a daily basis. You know, someone designed this water bottle, how it is all put together. Someone designed the packaging that your lunch comes in. Someone designed the packaging your chapstick comes in. They designed the label, what goes on the label, what that all looks like. My sister-in-law happens to design packaging for Coca-Cola. So things that you don't even really think about, you know, she works on what the box look like, what goes on the box, what's the holiday box look like. So there are creative individuals that go into this type of field that, again, it doesn't always have to look like you're this, you know, artist that sits at home and paints all day. You know, you can definitely take your creative side and insert that into lots of different places. Next is animation. Animators are typically not a one-person show. They are individuals that work collaboratively with lots of different people. So that might be something to consider. A lot of times artists, even if you are more of an introverted person, you have to sometimes communicate with others or work collaboratively. Animators oftentimes work on multiple devices, so that's something to consider as well. They might work on a MacBook or an iPad. So you have to be well versed in working with not only animating by hand traditionally with a pen and paper, but then how do you transition and then put that into the computer and render it into an animation. Museum studies was the last kind of profession I thought I would just highlight today. Oftentimes you forget about, oh, people actually work in the museum, because when you go to the museum, you look at the works of art and you know, you might see a few guards or something like that. But there are individuals that is their profession. They might be the person that lectures to you or walks you through an exhibition and it kind of explains what you're seeing. They might work with school groups, adult groups, or a blend of the two. There are also individuals that all they do are the behind the scenes things. You never even see them. You know, they're the ones that are building the exhibitions. They're on the scissor lift like you see in this picture here, or they're actually hanging the work on the wall, cleaning the space, painting the walls to go with the exhibit. And then there are also restoration workers. So people that care for our most precious artifacts. They help maintain the quality of the artwork. So for education, there's a variety here. So it could definitely be that you go to school and earn an AA. There's also a BA, a Bachelor of Arts in the Visual Arts. BFA is a much more tailored study of a BA. It requires more hours. It also typically you have a focus. For example, you might get a BFA in ceramics. And so your studio courses are kind of tailored towards ceramics. There's an MA. I have an MA in art education. Kara has an MFA. So her MFA was more studio focused and again required her more hours. There's also a PhD in EDD, and it kind of depends on where you go. There are doctoral studies in studio art now. That used to not really be the case, but now it's becoming more common. But a lot of the PhD EDD studies are more in the conceptual part of the visual arts, such as art education, art theory, art history, for example. So sometimes schools might require that you have a portfolio to apply to their school, and sometimes they don't. So that's something to consider if you're looking into a school. You know, what are their requirements in terms of what they're looking for. For the industry, it ranges vastly in terms of the salary. Kind of depends on where you want to go, what you're doing. In some creative fields, artists live off of their work. And then others might have like a day job. And I hate to use you as an example, Kara, because I know this really isn't considered your day job. But like I mentioned, she works as a professional artist, sells her work, shows her work in galleries. But then she's a professor by day. So oftentimes a lot of artists kind of are double dipping, so to speak, in different professions, I guess you could say. Others find creative and rewarding careers in a traditional workforce. Work environment. So something to consider, the environment might vary depending on where you work. How I dress here as an instructor at an institution is very different than how I dress at home if I'm creating artwork at home. A tattoo artist is likely going to look a little different when they walk into work each day than someone who is the curator of a museum. So that can vary depending on what you decide you want to go into. For your work schedule, something to think about, and we'll have photographers speaking with you shortly, is oftentimes you have to consider that, what are the hours that you might be working if you go into that field? For example, you might say, oh, I really want to be a wedding photographer, but then you say, oh, I really don't want to work weekends. Well, guess what? Most people get married on the weekend. So that's something to kind of think about. Some jobs might land at working nights. For example, when I worked in museums, oftentimes we would have events at night. So that's something to think about as well. Many jobs might be inside, but some might land you outside. For example, if you're a muralist. So I decided to include one of our own fabulous murals in Fort Dodge here, this grain silo mural. So something to think about is this artist has to get on this gigantic lift to create his work. He's also outside in the elements. So that's something to think about. He also had to submit a plan for his work. It wasn't like they just called him up and said, hey, can you paint this? And he just showed up. There's a huge process oftentimes into getting into this kind of work. So it's just something to think about. And again, like I said, the environment can drastically change because clearly how he dresses to create this mural and how I dress are very different. Physically active is important to kind of think about. If you go into graphic design or animation, you're likely going to sit and look at a computer a lot. If you are working as a glass blower or a ceramic artist, there's more lifting involved of like physical exertion. So just something to kind of think about. Sometimes, of course, like I mentioned, graphic designers tend to look at a screen a lot. So that's something to kind of consider. Like, I actually thought that by the end of my career in school that, oh, maybe I want to go into graphic design because I liked it so much. Then I decided, that's not the only thing I want to do. So that's another thing to kind of think about that, is that the one medium you want to go into? Of course, the work environment, something to think about in terms of safety in your profession. If you're working as a ceramic artist, you're working with a kiln that gets insanely hot, right? You have to deal with ventilation. If you are painting a mural on a building, for example, maybe you want to wear a respirator. So just some different things to consider and think about. So hopefully this gave you just a little snapshot of what you could maybe do as someone who likes art and wants to go into the visual arts. And I'll pass the baton to Kara, who's going to walk you through this awesome resource that we discovered a few years ago, didn't we, Kara? And we've shared it with students ever since we found it because we just think it's just awesome.
Yeah. Well, hi guys, my name is Kara Weyand, like Jennifer was just saying, and I am an art instructor here. I teach a lot of the studio stuff like drawing, the messy studio stuff, drawing and painting, although Jennifer does ceramics. So yeah, I got my education in studio art, but I realized after I was done with college that I'm a little bit too social to stay in a studio alone all day and work on stuff. I kind of drive myself insane. So I realized I needed to focus on a career that would also let me socialize with people. So that's how I kind of ended up where I am today. So those of you, the students who are here, can you guys write into the chats like what kinds of jobs you might be interested in or what sorts of fields you might be interested in? I'm just kind of curious. And if you don't know, you can just write that you don't know. That's fine. I know that when I started looking at arts, I was asked one question by my parents. And some of you can probably guess what that question is. How in the world are you going to make a living? How are you going to pay your bills? How are you going to have money to go on a vacation? Stuff like that. They were very worried about all of those things. And so that's where this resource that we have for you guys today, I think that it'll be something useful for your parents or anyone else who is concerned. They are concerned about you because they want you to be happy, successful, and stable adults, but also, we want to do what we want to do, right? So I'll share the screen here. I'm going to take you to the Career Art Project website. And I oftentimes cannot remember exactly what this website is, but then I just type into Google Career Art Project or something like that, and it always pops up right away. So I wish I would have had this website when I was a student because it actually organizes a lot of the different industries that art students go into and talks about different schools, different types of degrees and things like that. Okay, we have an author, we have fashion design, graphic design. That's great. I have students who are planning on doing all three of those things in some of my classes this semester, actually. That's great. So in this career art project, basically you can look at this. There are actual ways that you can look at careers. And there's lots of different ways to click around in this website. But they have like here some popular careers. So I'm going to click on fashion designer since a few of you mentioned fashion designer. So it gives you sort of an overview of what a fashion designer does, where the types of places that they work. There are US Bureau of Labor statistics about the types of pay that fashion designers might make. And so if you scroll on down, education, training requirements, job outlook, they've kind of put all of this stuff into one place for you. And then also, you say, I like fashion, but I don't really know what in fashion. They also list like some of the specific things that fashion designers might go into, whether it's fashion consulting, fashion merchandising. Those are a little bit more sales oriented. Modeling, you know what that is, but there's designing, lots of different things. So I would really recommend checking out this website. And you can also, search by industry. Somebody, if you're interested in drama or theater, performing arts, they even have some of that stuff on here. I don't know how much stuff for actual writing, like if I'm thinking about writing prose or something like that, but you might find some things that apply, and I'm sure that McKinsey could help you find other information too, or put you in touch with some people. Oh, we do have novelist on here. Never mind. I stand corrected. Novelist is on here. You've got it. So I would just encourage you guys to check this out. And so when your parents say, what are you going to do with that? Which is what my parents always said, because I changed my major about 6 times my first year of college. They always wanted to know, what are you going to do with that? How are you going to pay your bills? And this is just a great resource. So I'll stop there. I want to give Shelley Bodorf, who is our liaison with the Fort Dodge Fine Arts Commission, give her a chance to talk with you guys a little bit about what artists do, maybe from a more community, the community side of things. So I'm just going to pass it off to her. But yeah, just feel free to use that website. I think it's a really great resource. And then we'll have time for questions towards the end of today.
Okay. You guys are a tough act to follow. Can you hear me okay? Okay. There's a little bit of a delay, I think, on my end. So yes, like Kara said, my name is Shelley Bodorf, and I am the executive director of the Fort Dodge Fine Arts Association, which is a nonprofit arts organization in our community. And I am also the community and college fine arts director for Iowa Central Community College. And I also am their piano player, their accompanist. So I have all kinds of things layered on my job that Jennifer kind of mentioned in her presentation. My background is music education. I graduated from high school and knew I had an interest and a passion for the arts and for education and culture. And my dad told me, he said, Shelly, at that time he was 58, and he said, I'm 58 and I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. You have to just pick something. And so I picked music education, and I loved it. And I should say, now I'm 41 and I still am not sure what I'm going to be when I grow up. So, but I chose music education, graduated with a music ed degree, and taught high school choir for several years. I taught middle school, went back to teaching high school for a while. I did some subbing. I've taught some private lessons for singing and piano over the years. I've also been a working musician through this whole time with my piano playing and some singing. And then after a few years teaching, I just learned that education, educating the community on the importance of why art and music and culture is so important, and constantly re-educating them was something that needed to be done also. It's hard when you're teaching to also be promoting what you're doing to the community and showcasing everything. And I think that's also true for artists and musicians. Most that I know, they aren't great about bragging about their work and sharing their work and getting it out there and being vulnerable with sharing that. And so it's fun. I've kind of transformed my job into doing some of that as well. I got involved with a nonprofit in our community, the Fort Dodge Fine Arts Association. Their mission is to promote, support, and celebrate the arts in our community with businesses as well. And I just felt like this was something I could really dive into. And I've been working for them for 4 years. I was the first employee for that organization. And after 3 years of that, I was able to partner this position with Iowa Central Community College as well. And it's just every year, it's just transforming into something. You definitely need to be flexible if you are, going into some sort of creative outlet. And here, I guess I did come up with a few just bullet points that I wanted to mention as I was sitting down and thinking about, how did I get to this career right here today? And I think networking is huge, and starting that now and making that list of people who may be able to help you down the road longer and longer and longer, so that you have those resources as you venture through your career path. You need to keep yourself open to opportunities, find unique opportunities, and then say yes to those opportunities. Just try them out. You have to try things in order to know that you don't like them, which is just as important as knowing when you do like them. Embrace your uniqueness. Someone mentioned writing and fashion, and I think there are probably jobs in all of these industries that aren't even discovered yet. My position with the Fort Dodge Fine Arts and my position with Iowa Central Community College never existed before. So I was lucky enough to be able to kind of create this dream job for myself by using this network of people and community that I've built around myself to be able to support my strengths. And Jennifer mentioned this too, and I, as you can probably tell, don't really have a problem with this, but you have to be at least somewhat of a people person. You have to be able to step outside of your comfort zone and ask questions and ask for help and be able to say, I don't know, and know that that's okay too. So if, like you said, if some of you are introverts, you have to maybe do some exercises to break out of that a little bit. But I think building those skills will help, again, to create that network list. So I am by no means saying, do this job, do this job, do this job, because it is definitely hard work. The hours that she mentioned are not conventional. You know, some weeks they're really, really long, and then the next week it might just be regular workday. But it's when we're in a normal world with performances and events and things happening like that, it's not uncommon to work a 75-hour week. I mean, it's crazy during some of those times. And all of these other professors and teachers can attest to that as well. I am to my list where it says detergent, iced tea, and eggs. So I think I have hit everything that I was going to touch on, but keep yourself open, find your uniqueness and find those opportunities, and don't be afraid to say yes.
Can I just jump in really quick and add to that? Yes, it is so great to explore your options. And if you find something you truly love, you won't care when you're spending extra time on it. You won't care that you have to work really hard. You find the right kind of balance for you, but if you find the right job for you, you are truly motivated to do it. You know, you're excited to do the work, and that's how you should feel about your job. So just throwing that out there. It's a good thing to want to go to work in the morning, and I do feel that way. So yeah. All right.
I agree with Kara. I know a lot of people that like I graduated college with, and you know, they might make a lot of money, but they hate going to work every day. And I cannot imagine that. I absolutely love my job. I think it's so fun. And I've always done something creative and in the visual arts. And it's okay that it might change a little bit, you know, throughout your career, like Shelley mentioned, you know, be open to new things. And yeah, so.
All right, are you guys ready for questions if they have any for you three? Okay, are there any questions? And I can start us off with one. I wrote one on the board here that came in privately from the chat. And they wanted to know, how does COVID affect your classes right now at Iowa Central, your programs? Like the hands-on stuff.
Well, I teach drawing and painting and 2D design. Jennifer teaches 2D design and graphic design. In my classes, we have been doing where we meet face-to-face, just smaller class sizes so that everyone can kind of spread out. And then we wear masks, you know, and we do a lot of cleaning. But fortunately, we have enough space that we've been able to kind of spread out and do a lot of that stuff face-to-face, just trying really hard to social distance, you know. So I feel like in terms of drawing and our design, you know, it really wasn't too impacted just because we were still able to come in. And then if we did have to meet virtually because of the way that we have like resources like Zoom now, and we can use our cell phones as cameras, I found that it was quite easy to switch to virtual teaching for drawing because I was able to use my cell phone as like a camera and sort of show what I was drawing on the screen with my students and kind of work through drawings with them. So, you know, it actually worked out a lot better than I expected it to. But some other areas, you know, it's a little bit trickier to think about, like ceramics. That was a more difficult one to imagine doing the social distance. So we haven't offered that one yet this year, but hopefully we'll be able to do so again really soon. Yeah, artists are good at adapting. We're creative. So we have been making it work.
Yeah, we like demonstrations and stuff. I record a lot of things so that students have access to it. You know, if maybe their Wi-Fi is not cooperating or they just need to revisit something. So it actually, it's kind of been a blessing in disguise in terms of me creating instructional materials for students to help them. You know, I may not have created some of that stuff had this not popped up. But it's been really good, and it's been a great resource for students. And like Kara said, it really hasn't, I mean, you're still able to create and draw and do things, and then you just photograph your work to submit it to your instructor rather than handing in your drawing to your instructor. So that's actually helped students grow in their skills of photographing their work for the most part. And then students used to do physical portfolios that they would turn in to me. Well, now it's all digital. So they create everything electronically.
And that's actually really good practice because that's the way that most museums and galleries, that's how people want your work today. They want it digitally. They want digital portfolios. They're not going to want you to come lug in a big box of paintings to show them, they're going to want to see digital images. So hopefully that has been helpful. I think that my students' photography has improved greatly this semester when they take pictures of their drawings.
I also want to mention from a different perspective, I'm not involved in the day-to-day visual art classroom setting, but I am involved in the music department setting. And so I've had some firsthand experience on campus and in the community, and all of our worlds have been rocked this year, just back and forth and back and forth. And the common goal, or the common thread that I've seen this whole year, has been how well Iowa Central as a whole has held it together. And I don't see the students suffering from this. It's just a part of being creative and being in a creative field and learning how to adapt and moving on with it. And I think that there's a lot of things in the community and beyond that haven't been able to handle it so well. So it's definitely been a challenge for everybody, but the students are still thriving.
Alrighty, and I actually just had a student write in a really good question. He's wondering about the average income of someone in the creative field.
That is so hard because, even if I just talk about studio artists, it depends on if you're able to find the right market, how organized you are, if you're able to market yourself. A studio artist, they could be making $20,000 a year. They could be making $200,000 a year. It just really depends on where you live, what you do. I would say that in the arts, it has a lot to do with where you live. You're probably going to find more higher paying art related jobs in larger metropolitan areas, but not always. There are also like people in small towns who need to hire people to make websites or to do graphic design and stuff. But maybe Jennifer has a better idea of some numbers.
Well, I just was going to say that website, Kara, and I put that in the chat, thecareerproject.com or the artcareerproject.com. If you click on specific professions, it gives you an average income. So that's kind of a ballpark so that, you can kind of look into that. Typically, people that go into this industry go into it because they love it, not because they want to become a millionaire. So it's just a different type of motivation. Like I said, I have a lot of friends that make good money out of college, but they don't like going to work every day. They use every sick day they possibly can because they just dread going to work. I cannot imagine that. I don't think there's anyone in this Zoom right now that's presenting today that doesn't like what we do every day. So it's definitely a trade-off, but I can tell you that we live comfortably, I would say collectively, all of us. But yeah, if you want really specifics, like Kara says, it definitely varies, but that website will be a great resource because you can click and it will tell you what the average income would be.
Yeah, and then when you hone in on some of those other special gifts and things that you can provide, you can add extra employment opportunities on top of that, like Kara mentioned with studio artists. My experience is music, which is a little bit different, but I play the piano at weddings and funerals and, all of those places where people need a piano player and don't have one. So you can always add to that income as well.
Good information. Thanks, ladies. If you guys have any more questions for them, please write them in the chat or you can ask after the end. We're going to continue to keep rolling. But before we do, you three that just presented, do you have any advice for a high school student? So if they were interested, what should they do from here? Is there a certain class to take in high school? Are there skills they should be working on now? Or researching, or what would you say before we move on to the next presenter?
Say take everything. Take anything that strikes your fancy, do it. You're not going to know unless you try. That sounds like really hippie-ish art teacher advice, But that is literally how we have already said, you discover what you like and what you don't like, and it all feeds into your education. If you're interested in something, chase after it, and don't let people tell you you can't do something. You know, just, you've got to do your work, you know, like I had to prove to my parents that I was going to be able to get a job and I was going to be okay. So that's my biggest advice. And definitely when you're looking at colleges, look up the instructors that teach colleges and see what kind of work they do, because that can give you a good idea of the kind of work that they might be helping you make in the future. So I'll stop so Jennifer can talk.
And I think don't be afraid to reach out to those teachers. You know, that's ahead of time. You know, ask some questions. Say you're interested in their program. What would they like you to know? Almost like you're interviewing them. And just reach out to people that are doing anything in the area that you might be interested in or not. Just start educating yourself in that craft.
Yeah, I agree with what's been said so far. And like Kara said, take as many classes as you possibly can. You know, try things that maybe you've not even tried before, just to learn something new. And especially if you end up going into art in college, try taking classes you know nothing about. You know, that's what you're there for. You're not, you know, if you already feel like you're really good at drawing, great. But if you've not even touched Photoshop, take a class to learn how to do it. You know what I mean? It's just definitely a good way to broaden your portfolio. And you might discover that you really like something that you didn't expect. For example, when I went into school, I'd never touched a blowtorch in my life. And I signed up for metalworking, and that ended up being my emphasis. And my high school didn't have that. So I definitely think beyond, when you go into college, try to take a good variety, get the most you can out of that experience and that education.
I can kind of transition into my part. Hi, I'm Rochelle Green, just to kind of piggyback on what they had said. Also with those experiences, you'll be exposed to people from all walks of life. You know, people who may have been born and raised in a different country than you, or climate, or, you know, when you're taking yourself out of your comfort zone, from what I have realized in my life, when I remove myself from my comfort zone, even though I'm an introvert with extrovert skills, I had to force myself to do that. It's not easy, but like Shelly had said before, you know, she's a little bit more of an extrovert, and I can make it seem like I am one, not necessarily, but you have to do that. You have to put yourself out there. So what I've realized over, you know, the several decades I've been on this earth is that the more you've taken yourself out of a comfortable situation and, you know, met new people, or, you know, tried something that might be a challenge to you. That was always one thing. You know, I think a lot of time artists will be a little bit of a perfectionist. We tend to be, you know, we're super hypercritical of our work. And, you know, even though we want criticism, it also hurts our feelings sometimes. And so putting your work and yourself out there can be very difficult, but that's how we grow. That's how we grow. That's how we change. That's how we become better. So, I agree with everything that they said, and making sure that you expose yourself to new experiences. So I'll kind of go into talking about the photography industry a bit. I want to say a little shout out to Peyton, though. Peyton, hello. Glad to see you here. Peyton was one of my summer campers at Iowa Central. And I follow her on social media, and she has lots of really great work that she's been working on. So glad to see you here. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of give you a brief background of myself and kind of talk a little bit about how my career path has changed over the last few years. Okay, let's see here. Okay, can you guys see that okay? All right, let me move some windows here. Okay, so as I said, my name is Rochelle Green. I am the photography instructor and coordinator at Iowa Central. I'm also a professional photographer, and my career has evolved and changed quite a bit over the last a couple decades. That's hard to say, but it is true. So I'm going to kind of just talk a little bit about that as I'm talking about what a photographer could potentially do. So really a photographer is someone who takes photos, and that's all of us. It has been stated that there's over 1 trillion photos taken each year, especially now when it's so easy to do. There are many practicing photographers, and Jennifer Dutcher and I actually just worked together on this collaborative project where there's a photographer who was basically discovered on Instagram from Adobe. It was Instagram, wasn't it? And she actually does product work and things for Adobe now, which is really quite remarkable. What a great opportunity that digital artists and digital photographers have, that their work is seen, so easily and so quickly by posting it on social media. So a good photographer is skilled, practiced, interested, and ambitious. I've educated hundreds of students over the last 20 years. My background actually is I was an education elementary art educator for several years. I went to UNI and I got my master's in fine arts, my bachelor's in fine arts. And my dad said the exact same thing that people alluded to. Actually, what he said was, you can't get a fine art degree. You have to do something that's going to make you money, like be an educator. And I'm like, I would never do that. Look at what I am now. Now, I kind of took a different route for that. So I got my bachelor's in fine arts and I worked in the photography field for about 6 years before I went back and got my, I got to clear my throat for this, and listened to my dad and got my education degree also. But they definitely are both beneficial for sure. So you have to be really interested in what you're doing. You have to be ambitious. I always get this question, like, what makes a photographer professional? Well, if they're getting paid for it, basically, you don't necessarily, have to take advanced level courses. But what I do want to say is all of our students who have a degree or are working towards a degree are so much more well-versed in the world that it makes them much more sought after and skilled in their field, because they're not just being educated in this just tunnel vision. They're being exposed to so many other avenues of art, and all of those things will just kind of help feed the photographer. So when you're taking classes, it's a life, you honestly have to be a lifelong learner for sure. Like Jennifer had mentioned, our industry has changed dramatically, since I've been in it. I started photographing with film and then went into digital and now we're going into mirrorless cameras and HDR. The career changes so quickly. We also have seen a shift in home-based studios or studio storefronts in towns. And a lot of our students and photographers are now working from their home or doing freelance, and they have found ways where they could save money by having, by not having a studio storefront or having that overhead, and, the opportunity of travel and all of those things just kind of come into play with that as well. So artists, really all of us, above everything else, you dedicate your time and your hard work to creating. And really, we eat, sleep, and breathe our art in our process. Like, people will ask me all the time, like, oh my gosh, how do you do that? How do you teach all day and then work at the studio? And I don't actually think of it that way. It's just who I am. It's just a part of who I am. And, there is no separation for me, which may sometimes be difficult, but I'm married to an educator too, so he gets it. So talk a little bit about my background. I opened a studio in 2006. When I opened the studio, I actually was living in Las Vegas and I'd moved back to Iowa. And when I opened the studio, the one thing that I heard over and over again is, oh my gosh, you got so busy and so booked out, like right away. It's like an overnight success. That is so much. It's so far from the truth, I should say. There is no overnight success when it comes to, being successful. It's all these little tiny steps that you take, to build up a success. It's the same thing as like being educated, or, you know, I always tell my students too, they're like, I'm just so frustrated because I can't get this exposure right, or whatever. And I was like, well, how many times have you gone out to shoot today? Well, I haven't. Well, an athlete has to practice too, right? We have to build our skills. And so the more you build on your skill, you know, the more you work towards your dream, then it happens over time. But I will tell you this, you know, and I know there's some savants out there. I mean, Shelley Bodorf is probably one of them, actually. She just woke up one day and was like, but you have to work at your skill. You just have to. I'm going to skip through some of these. So what happened with me and my business is who I'm going to ask a question. Who can tell me what was a social networking service that launched in 2004? Who knows? I bet Michelle knows. So Facebook, actually it was called The Facebook at the time. And I remember, you know, and film was like my love, and I really did not want to start shooting digitally. I actually was kind of one of those people that were like, no, forget it. If people don't want me to photograph and film, then I'm not taking their photos, which was silly because, you know, that's just where our industry was going. And so I remember one of my seniors that I photographed, his mom called and she's like, hey, my son really wants to put his photos that you took on the Facebook, you know, and I was like, well, what is that? And she's like, I'm not really sure, but it's something on the computer. It's like a networking thing. And I was like, send him over right now. So Jacob came over and he logged me into the computer and he's like, check this out. This morning when I logged in, I had 5 friends. I have 8 now. Isn't this so cool? And so, you know, it's taking a risk. You know, I was selling my prints to my clients. And so the one thing that I thought of was if I put my images on the Facebook for him to share with everyone, then no one's going to buy my photographs. And that was one fear I had. But then in the back of my head was like, you got to do this. You got to jump on this right away. You know, this is actually a really good thing that could promote your work. So there was this fight kind of between myself and taking a risk, which was a big risk. It could have been a big financial risk. Actually paid off, you know, very well after that, because now my work is actually being seen and people are sharing it and people are talking about it. So the other thing I'd like to say is to take a risk, take risks. You know, you really want to kind of think about those risks and pros and cons, but taking risks. The best advice I ever received early in my career was under promise and over deliver. You tell someone you're going to do something, then do it and do it well and get it to them before they even, you know, even question or ask for it. It's a super simple statement, and this can actually be used in any aspect of life. If you say that you're going to meet someone at a certain time, be there. You know, having that commitment and holding yourself accountable, I think is one of the key components to being a successful person. It's simple, it's a simple statement, but it's really, really beneficial in your education and your success in your career field. So if you want to be a photographer, there's a lot of and this was actually the thing that I was not into at all. When I was getting my degree at UNI, you know, my goal was to travel the world and photograph for National Geographic, you know, and I'm terrified of the world, actually. Like, there's snakes and stuff out there, but that's kind of what I wanted to do. I'm like, you know, I want to be exposed to all these interesting situations. But the one thing that I did not get an education in was business. You know, I really probably should have focused on that a little bit when I was getting my degree, because as an artist, when you actually graduate, you have to figure out how to live. I mean, there's a term starving artist for a reason, right? We have to be able to sell ourselves and our work and market and really kind of promote ourselves. And so that's one thing. Somebody had mentioned, you know, what classes should I take in high school? I think any sort of personal relations class, marketing, design, business, sales, and honestly, psychology, I think, is a really important class as well. We need to know how to read people as well. And we also need to be open to listening and communicating with people, because that's how we create our work as well. So I would definitely encourage you to take some business classes. Also, people skills. you just have to have them. You know, photography is really a people business. In the industry of studio photography, you know, and portrait work, which is, you know, my background right now, although I started out as a fine art photographer, and that's really how I see myself still. I've been working on a collection of street photography work for quite some time now also, but those projects don't really pay my bills. They feed my soul, which, you know, there's a balance there. Like, I do those things because I, you know, when I'm photographing for myself, those are the times that I really, really feel connected to photography, also teaching. But it's odd because photographing people for my business, Green Door, you know, families and seniors, although it's fun doing it, it doesn't necessarily like feed my inner soul of creativity, you know? So you really have to kind of balance how you make an income with what makes you happy. And I feel like with what I have going on now, where I can work on my own work, also teach students and hopefully inspire them to find their own path and be creative, and then have the studio is really a beautiful triangle for me that works pretty well. And, you know, I've focused my energies on different parts of them at different times. Right now, my energy is very focused on my students at Iowa Central, and the studio is, you know, third place. It's the third wheel right now because I focused a lot of energy on my studio for quite some time. And so I think what, you know, Jennifer and Kara and Shelly had talked about earlier is this is not a stagnant career. This evolves and morphs into lots of different things, which makes it really exciting. Another thing is to just learn to be unafraid, think big, you know, set some goals for yourself, but instead of getting frustrated when that goal you don't hit that goal, give yourself little steps towards that goal. The other thing is, you know, recreate yourself, stay relevant. I constantly have to learn new things, take new classes, you know, really kind of go back and re-look at how the industry is changing. And then I have some advice for you guys too. Don't doubt your abilities. So know what you're good at and what your strengths are, and know what maybe those areas are that you don't shine as bright, and maybe give some extra energy to those, you know, if you want to build that skill set. The other thing is, and I tell my students this all the time as well, is chasing trends will weaken your work. Even though we have lots of opportunities to look at Pinterest and what's happening in our industry, if we are copying what we already have seen, then it is not helping us be able to create and evolve. We're just looking at it and dissecting it. It's kind of like a recipe book, I think of. You know, when you look at it and you're like, oh, I wonder how somebody made that. Now, I'm not saying that I don't encourage people to look and research and get some ideas, but you need to have your own voice and you need to express that. And so if you're constantly just looking at what's happening in the trend and copying that trend, then you're always going to be behind because something new and better is already happening. So make sure that you kind of have a balance with that. So some possible careers, you know, again, the industry changes so drastically. Portrait photographer, like I mentioned, event photographer, so you're photographing conventions and things of that nature. Commercial photography is actually huge right now. It's probably bigger than it ever has been due to e-commerce. So people are photographing for websites and, you know, commercial type websites and platforms, communications, design, you know, there's all kinds of career paths for that. Before I stop, I wanted to just show you and introduce you to a photographer by the name of Jackie Hint, which she's on here right now. So hold on a second. So Jackie actually has a studio called Jackie Addison Portrait Photography. And I encourage you guys to follow her like on Instagram. She actually posts a lot of behind the scenes little video clips of each of her sessions. And I'll add her website and her Instagram onto the chat when I'm done talking. But it's really cool to see that because then you can kind of see what really happens in a photo session. It's super interesting because, you know, we have this creative eye and we can see the world a little bit differently than a lot of other people can when you're an artist. And so when I take my sessions to locations that might be behind a dumpster or smell like cat urine or something like that, they're always like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. I can't believe she's taking us in this spot, but she must see something that we don't. And then when they go to look at the photos, it's so funny because they'll bring like the grandparents into my studio and they're like, oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. Look at that light. That location is amazing. Where were you guys at? And then the parents are always like, oh my gosh, you'll never believe it. And a lot of times they've already snapped a photo of me taking this photo behind a dumpster that smells like cat urine. So just pay attention to the world. It's such a beautiful world that we live in. And unfortunately, these times really make us question that. But if you just stop listening to all of, the noise and really start looking and paying attention and creating, it really truly changes your perspective and your outlook on life completely. So yeah, just look at the world, look at everything, and look at the people around you and take advantage of any possible situation you can. Whew, did I get through that? Okay, am I on time?
A lot of good information. Thank you, Rochelle. Does anyone have questions? You can write it in the chat box, or you can wait till the very end too. Not yet? Okay. I don't see any questions yet. Jacob, if you want to go ahead and start.
All right, that's a lot to follow up on. Man, you ladies did some nice work there. So I'm Jake Zweibaummer. I'm the coordinator and instructor for graphics tech and web tech here at Iowa Central. I've been a professional graphic designer for almost 22 years now. So went to Iowa State and got my BFA in graphic design. So when I was in high school, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And so I'd been working some jobs doing manual labor. I'd been working in the factory my dad worked in the summers. And I really did not want to do. I even worked in a meat processing plant. And so I was like, I gotta find a way to get out of this. I gotta find a career. And the things I was really interested in high school were my art classes. So I was interested in drawing. I was interested in painting, doing some ceramic stuff. So I was like, how can I find a degree? How can I find a career, after this, after when I go to college? So I went through Iowa State's career book, or their major book, because my brother was going to school there. And I was like, wow, this graphic design, that sounds interesting. I suppose I could do that. And, keep in mind, this is far enough back to where that was before the internet and everything. So there's not a whole lot of research I could do other than trying to find some books on it. But I'm like, cool, I'm sold, I'll apply, I'll go there. So Iowa State was one of those programs where you have to go through a certain number of courses to kind of build up a basic portfolio, and then you apply to the program. And so my first year, I applied to the graphic design program at Iowa State, and they allowed 38 students out of 215, I think, into the program, and I was number 40. So that crushed me. I was devastated. And I'm like, but I really don't know what else I'm going to do. So I worked really hard that whole next year to bring up my GPA, to do much better work. And I presented again, and I got in that next wave of students. So that was kind of, I kind of had my whole future planned out. I had the next 15, 20 years planned out. And that one little roadblock just kind of devastated me. So it's like, I'm not going to let it be the end of me. And I'm not going to let that define me. So I tried harder and got into the program, and that's kind of just been my focus ever since. So my career right out of Iowa State is I started working for Meredith Corporation in Des Moines. That's a magazine publishing company. And so I was lucky enough to get in there as an entry-level designer. And so Iowa State really didn't prepare me all that well for my career, unfortunately. So Iowa State they do a lot of art theory, design theory. So I was really well versed in how to create something really well, but I didn't have the technical skills. So Iowa State didn't teach me any of the software. We all had to kind of learn that on our own. We had to pick that up as we went along with projects. And so that was kind of another one of those things where you have to be self-motivated. You have to try and figure out those things. And so first day on the job, they're like, okay, here, do this story. Here's your computer. I'm like, how do I start the software? I was lost. And luckily I worked with some really well-educated, really well-versed designers, and they kind of walked me through the whole process. And I started learning quickly. I wanted to learn more. I asked a lot of questions, more than I'm sure my coworkers wanted me to ask. And then I also got into the photography side. So part of my job was to direct photographers. So I would have to go down to this Meredith Corporation photo studio, which is this huge basement area with multiple rooms for different setups for photography. And so I was assigned as a 23-year-old to go and art direct photographers that had like 25 years of experience. And they treated me like I was the boss, and, just smiled when I would say something stupid, but I would continue to ask them questions. So I learned a lot about photography through that process too. And what was cool about that job is, as I was only there for 5 years, but I went up through the ranks. I started to have my work recognized. I was given accolades. But we also had a marketing department in New York City. And so we had a private jet in Des Moines that would fly between New York City and Des Moines to take our executives there. So I was lucky enough to be able to hop on that a couple times, and it would fly you into New Jersey. A limousine would pick you up, take you down to Manhattan. And then I had some photo shoots. I had to art direct some photo shoots there. So that was pretty amazing. My only times flying on a private jet like that. Then we decided to move to this area. My wife's from Humboldt. So when we decided to have a family, we moved here, and I started working for Heartland Communications. So I don't know if any of you know anything about Heartland Communications, but it's certainly not the private jet kind of work environment. Still, it was a great learning experience. I was given 3 magazines to art direct, and they're kind of more like shopper magazines. So you're creating advertisements. It's just tons and tons of advertisements about 14, 16-hour days kind of things. And so worked there for a couple of years, and then I moved into a job with the Iowa Department of Natural Resources. So I was the art director for Iowa Outdoors magazine for 11 years, and most of that I worked from my home office. So like some of the ladies were saying, I had to dress very professional when I worked at Meredith Corporation, probably a little bit more casual at Heartland Communications, and then working from home. I tried to keep it as professional as possible, but no one knew what I was doing at that time. But again, I had to be a self-motivator. I had to be driven. I had to be responsible to get my work done, because we are a very, very deadline-driven profession. So that's just a little bit of background on me. I've been teaching here at Iowa Central this is my 4th year. So things are going well. I think students are doing well. So what we teach here is technology, the technology side that I was missing from my education at Iowa State. So I teach the Adobe Creative Suite. So they're learning Photoshop, they're learning Illustrator, Adobe InDesign, they're learning WordPress. Some are taking Dreamweaver. Just a lot of software experience. We're just hammering it. But I also try to interject my 22 years of professional experience into all the projects that I assign to them. So, there's a lot of guided work. Students start working on things. I'm like, no, sometimes I'll tell them it's crap. It's hard to hear sometimes. We talk about that word, easily offended, because, we kind of feel like we're doing something really creative and brilliant. So someone tells you it's crap, it breaks your heart sometimes. But some people need to hear that, and then we can move forward from that. So I've been told I should be nice like Jennifer Dutcher. So I'm going to make little bracelets, what would Jennifer Dutcher do kind of thing, and hand those out to my students when they come in their first year. So anyway, so basically what separates a graphic designer from like a fine artist is a graphic designer. Everything that we do is we're hired to basically deliver a message. We have to drive a message. So we're taking images and text and possibly motion graphics. We're combining those. We're kind of like, we're handed these pieces of a puzzle, and we have to put it together into a meaningful way that's going to draw people in, that's going to pull people in to look at your products or your business, whatever the case might be, whether that might be a logo or some sort of advertisement or marketing pieces or packaging that some of the others have alluded to. Those are all things that graphic designers do. And then web design. also plays right into that as well. So web designers need to be graphic designers as well, but they're two different mediums. So most of the time when we talk about graphic design, we're talking about print design. We're talking about web design. We're talking about something that's online, the visuals that we see on the internet. So I'm going to show you a few things here in just a minute. But the main things you want to be strong in as a graphic designer, you have to be a good communicator. You have to be creative. That's a hard thing for a lot of people. You have to be creative. You have to get those creative juices going. You have to be deadline driven, and that's one of the big things that I try to instill in my students is we're all about deadlines. So someone can hire you to do a logo, and they say, I need it by, say, December 7th. And you say, yep, I can do that. I'm going to design it. But December 7th, you're going to have it in your hands. You'll be ready to go. So those people that you're working with, they line up, the web designer, they line up the marketing, the placement for advertising in magazines and newspapers, that sort of thing. And if you don't deliver on that date, then all of a sudden everyone else misses their deadlines as well. So then that reflects poorly on you. And then they're not going to hire you. They're not going to come back to you. They're not going to recommend you. So a big part of our industry is networking. So you want to always be making good impressions on people. You want to be as positive as possible when you're working with people. Do what you say you're going to do. I think everyone's hit on that in their presentations. Rochelle, you too. Under promise and over deliver. I love that line. That's what I always try to do. I'm like, well, I can get those logo concepts to you in about 2 weeks. And they're like, well, okay, that'll work. And then usually I can't stop thinking about it. I just start designing, and 2 days later I have something ready to present. I'm like, do I show it to them or do I wait a couple more days to show it to them? And so I'll show it to them, and then they're just, wow, you must really want to do a great job for us. And then things just start to move faster. That makes a great impression on people. So those are the type of things that we want to do in our industry. I'm going to share my screen and just show you a few things. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, so this is my personal website. It needs a little bit of updating. So why I have a lot of layout design on here, a lot of magazine work. That's because at one point, a couple of years ago, I was trying to get more freelance work from different clients that were in the magazine industry. So I tried to show a lot of the different layouts that I've done in the past, just to give them a good idea of the type of work I can do. And some of these include my photography in this. So a lot of what I show on here is from my time at the Iowa Department of Natural Resources, where back in 2008, when we had the big recession, there was a lot of early retirement, trying to, cut expenses in government. And so a lot of our photographers were older gentlemen and they retired. So then all of a sudden I became a photographer. So this one in particular is not my photography work. So it's probably bad to be talking about that as I'm showing that. But that was something that was thrown on me. Photography was a hobby at the time. But then there's like, no, you're going out to the state park. You need to be across the state at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. We're lining up some hunters to pose with their guns, and we got some guys with pheasants. They're going to throw them up in the air, and you just have to be ready to go. So that was exciting for me. It got me out of the office. It changed it up. It was something different, and then I could shoot it the way I wanted to with my camera, with the layout in mind. So I knew exactly what I needed for my layout, and I would take those photos specifically for that layout. So that was kind of a nice thing, a nice change of pace for me. Here on my website, you can just see the variety of work I do. Here are a series of posters. Some of these are bicycle related. They were limited edition posters for an art show in Des Moines called Art Crank. Then Art Crank dropped the Des Moines location. They had locations all over the world. But then a group in Des Moines picked it up and it became pedal art. And so for a few years, I would create a unique poster, and then they would be screen printed. We'd just do a series of 30 of them, and then they'd be sold for $30 at the show. And so it's kind of a really good way to, again, network, and then to have your work put out there in front of a big audience in a larger metropolitan setting. So In a bigger city like Des Moines, a lot of people could see it. You could talk to those people at the opening of the show, tell them what your inspiration was for each of these pieces, and then potentially get hired to do some more graphic design work. Here was one that was kind of my anti-Lance Armstrong poster when he got busted for doping. So dopers banned for life by the US ADA, and you can too. So instead of his live strong, it became enhanced. But anyway, if you guys aren't familiar with Lance Armstrong, you should look that up. All right, and then, being involved in your community is a huge thing. It's a huge benefit to your community, especially if you're in a small community, as well as a benefit to you, because you get a network of people, you get to know people in your community. But I was part of I was one of the founding members of the Humboldt Area Arts Council. Back in 2004, we started this, and then we started an arts festival each year. So for the first 10 years, I designed a poster to promote it. So I have 10 of those Humboldt Arts Festivals posters. And so each year it was kind of a cool thing for me. I would talk these people into, hey, yeah, let's do this for the Arts Festival. But it gave me an opportunity to design something really cool each year and then have it printed, and it didn't cost me anything. So that was kind of nice, a nice boost to my portfolio. Also on here is a bunch of my logos. Some of these you might have seen. I'm going to actually show you kind of my process for logo design. It's the same type of process that most graphic designers are going to use. But again, a lot of these were just, a lot of logo business was just picked up because of networking, because of, getting involved in your community, talking to people. Then they learn who you are. They learn, you have to teach them what graphic design is. Most people don't really understand what graphic design is. So once they're educated on it, then they're willing to kind of open up their minds to doing something for their businesses. All right, and like I said, I have not updated this website in a couple of years. So there's some new work on here that I really would like to get put out there. And then I just put in a little bit of my photography. I'm not going to go into that because I'm not a professional photographer. It's just, again, it was a hobby that kind of became part of my profession. But I think it's important. I think photography is hugely important in graphic design and web design. And so I just talked with Rochelle. I'm changing some of the requirements for my coursework to include more photography in it. I think photography helps you learn composition, because you have to have a beautiful composition in a small, art space. And so if you're able to do that, make something meaningful that tells a story in a small space like that, you can be a really good graphic designer. The way I photograph everything, though, is I always leave space for text, because I photograph like a graphic designer. I'm expecting that I'm going to put a story on this, some sort of title treatment, or promotion, something. So there's always a lot of extra space in the photography that I do. All right. So talking about careers, I created this little website. This is for our virtual career, or virtual train visit days. And instead of doing a PowerPoint, I decided just to create a website. And this was done on Adobe Portfolio. So that's all included with the Adobe Creative Suite that my students have access to. And I actually assigned my sophomore class to design their own portfolios for their final, which they just presented a couple days ago. So I'll show you some of their work as well. But this is just for the program. So there's links here, and I'll put a link to this in the chat too. But there's links to our social media. So we have a Facebook page and an Instagram page. I do kind of a poor job of keeping that updated, but there's some good work that just came out of here at the end of the semester. I'm going to put out there if anyone cares to take a look at what the students are doing. But I wanted to go, there's a lot of different information on here. I wanted to go to, I believe it's the programs of study. So under programs of study, we just talk about some different career opportunities for graphic designers and web designers. So for graphic designers, potential careers might be a multimedia designer, web designer, logos, brand identity, creative or art director, photo editing, Photoshop, layout designer, digital illustrator, storyboard designer, concept designer, industrial or product designer. Which is a huge and growing field as well. So industrial design is pretty amazing. Potential careers for web technology or web designers, application developer, game developer, multimedia programmer, multimedia specialist, search engine optimization specialist, user interface designer or researcher, web content manager, web designer, web developer, database administrator, information systems manager, IT sales professional, systems analyst, technical author. And then when you think about what kind of money you can make, again, that what Kara was saying, you know, it really depends on where you live. A bigger city is going to have more opportunity for you. There's going to be more potential for jobs, but there's also going to be more potential for growth in those jobs. So it really depends on where you're living. But again, as things develop, as we've seen with this pandemic, people are working remotely. And so being a freelance designer is not such a bad thing, but people are also more open to not having the overhead of, you know, renting a physical space, just having people work from home. So if you can develop a good relationship with somebody and they trust you enough to work from home, as long as you have internet access and you have the Adobe Creative Suite, you could be a professional designer from anywhere. But you know, locally, if you were to get a job locally, a starting pay might be, you know, as low as $17 an hour for a graphic designer. For a web designer, maybe as low as $19 per hour. But again, it's one of those careers where you prove yourself, you show yourself with the work that you do. So the better work, the more devoted you are to your craft and the better work you do, the more you're going to make, the more you can charge. So as a freelancer, I've always had a full-time job, but I've always had my freelance company, Two Trees Design, on the side. And so I've always been able to make a little extra money on the side. And I started off, I just wanted business. So I started off charging $20 an hour. Then I got a lot more business. So I'm like, well, I should charge $40 an hour. And you know, business dropped off a little bit, but it was still quite a bit there. So then now I've kind of been locked in at $50 an hour for graphic design work on the side. Some projects like logo design, I'll charge a flat rate. Depending, you know, where that person is, what the logo is going to be used for, I'll charge a flat rate. So anywhere from like say $600 to $1,200 for a logo. So, and that's still if you're, you know, charging those kind of prices to people in bigger cities, they're used to people wanting $5,000 or $10,000 for a logo job. So if you're just charging $1,200, you're like, yeah, I'll do that all day long. So, and then that leads to other business as well. So I've kind of enticed, I can't really talk about the client that I'm working for now, but it's a client that has businesses in Knoxville and Des Moines, and they have me working on a project right now. I gave them a really good deal on it. So hopefully that leads to other work as well. And that's, again, that's that networking, that's that communicating with people, being friendly, being nice, working with people on things. All right, so I used to be a man of few words, but when I became a teacher, I had to learn how to, you know, say a lot more in a lot more detail. So I wanted to show you just, this is one of my students. She's in my portfolio class. She just submitted this for her final. Again, this is on Adobe Portfolio. And she's just a naturally talented designer. She does a really good job. And so she's a pleasure to have in class. But this is a showcase of her work. So this is incredibly important to have some sort of online presence, whether that's social media, you know, like Instagram is great. But I make them be on LinkedIn so they have a more professional, you know, social media account. Also on Facebook, not a lot of students are Facebook users. They're not huge Facebook users right now. It's more the quick and dirty Snapchat kind of thing. And then Instagram is kind of their more professional, you know, showcase of their work. So I make them create those accounts, but then they also need to have an online portfolio that shows more of their work. So the way she set up her portfolio, she put it into different categories for the different software that she uses. And then just put a few examples of her work and then a nice description about it. So as a graphic designer, once you get your degree or once you're a freelance designer, what you would do is you'd send out this link. You just copy this URL for this website and you'd send it out to different potential employers or clients, and they'll be able to take a look at your work. And then you always have to make sure that you have some sort of contact on there so that they can get in touch with you very easily with email or phone number. And then, you know, that's that's all people want to see. When I first got my job, I had to walk in with a great big suitcase looking portfolio full of printed work that might have little glue marks on it that you were embarrassed about. But it thing weighed like 60 pounds, and then you had to go put it down on the desk, and you'd have to rifle through that and show people your work that was, you printed out and pasted up on boards. And nobody wants that anymore. So they just want you to send them a web link, and they'll take a look at your work, and then they'll let you know if they're interested in doing any kind of work with you. And another student project was, this is some web design work for my HTML class, so just basic programming. So students come in here really not knowing how to even start a web page, and then by the end of it, they're leaving with something that's fully functional as a working website. And so if I go into here, any website you want to take a look at, see how somebody programmed it, you can always just go up, say like in Chrome, you go up to view, down to developer, and then view source. And that's going to show you all the coding for it. It's going to show you all the HTML and CSS that's involved. And so this is the kind of stuff that my students learn. And when they leave here, they may or may not continue to do coding from scratch like this, but at least they have that background in it. A lot of people will move into web design that's, basically like a drag and drop type system like Wix, WordPress based systems, which is great. I teach WordPress here at Iowa Central too. That's kind of the future, but somebody needs to know this back end part. Someone needs to know how to structure that WordPress site for other people to use it. So definitely a career that's in high demand is web design. That's why we have Last Dollar Scholar in the state of Iowa. Web design falls under that. So it's one of those things where the state of Iowa will pay for your education in web design as long as you stick to it and follow it all the way through. Anything that's not covered by your grants or financial aid, the state will pay for the rest of it. So you can basically get a degree at no cost. So something to think about if you are interested in web design. It's the reason for that is the state wants more web designers. They want to bring in more web-based industry into the state, like even Facebook. They want to have Facebook here. They want to have Google here. And so people need to know how to get into web development. So that's why the state is willing to do that, to keep people here in Iowa with those skills. So that's about it for me. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Thank you, Jacob. That's good information. If you guys have questions, you can go ahead and put it in the question box, the chat box, and we can keep on rolling through. So Michelle, Rusty, I don't know which one of you are going first.
Kind of wanted to do something kind of fun here real quick. Michelle, go ahead and unmute yourself there. We'll kind of tackle this one together. So first of all, I want to welcome all of you to the Iowa Central Career Day here at online. We're doing some fun stuff with this one. I'm the TV radio production coordinator, and Michelle is it's kind of the social media side of things. So Michelle, why don't you go ahead and start off and talk about what we got going on fun with the media stuff here.
So one thing we're putting together that hopefully will be starting in the fall is our digital media productions program. And basically what that is taking all media, so like news, specifically like journalism and reporting, and then giving students the opportunity to present that throughout all types of media. So specifically like social media, whether that's through YouTube videos or generating media that can be posted on Facebook and Instagram. I teach a class on social media campaigns. And so in there, we focus on all types, including like Pinterest, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and then how to run all of those different areas. So it's a really good thing, especially now. I would assume that a lot of you don't pick up a newspaper and read it. Maybe you do, and if you do, good for you, because that's one of those things that's kind of going to the wayside. But all newspapers are now moving online and vice versa. So It's a really good experience for students to be able to generate news on all platforms, I guess I would say. I don't know, what else do you want to add, Rusty?
Oh, that's cool. That's really cool. Hey, but I did want to kind of talk a little bit about the careers in broadcasting and the journalism side also with yours. But I've got a little video I put together real quick here this morning to kind of show off some of the things that students can do once they graduate. Now that these are actually videos from students actually doing things here on campus. So let me see if I can pull this up here quickly. I said I was always going to have this ready so we didn't have to go through this whole have it all going back and forth thing here, but we're going to try this. I'm going to try to do the screen share. There we go. And there it is. And I'm going to go ahead and share this right now. And you probably can't hear it, but that's okay. I just had some crazy music back behind it. But anyway, basically what this is our TV radio production program prepares students for careers in the TV and radio industry, doing audio production, being a radio DJ. I started when I was 14 years old in a radio station, and I've never worked a day in my life. And I know Michelle has been in the newsroom side of things, probably feels the same way. And it's adapted. It's really gone into a really cool deal where audio production and video production, whether it's on the news side, the radio side, all of media, the internet side, it's all become this kind of this jumbled up, really cool process now, where having all of those skills is amazing. I'm going to talk a little bit about broadcast here. I'm going to kind of just stop sharing this one. We're going to just kind of just some little video talking, just kind of showing you a little bit about what you can do. On location work is a big thing. Sports production is huge right now because, well, you can't go to the games. So high school, we've had little league teams reach out wanting to know if we could broadcast the little league games. So sports production is a huge thing. And it's one of those things where you're actually running the show. You're doing it. You're the person that's controlling what others see. So this is kind of a neat deal. And if you're in the talk about it side, you can be the voice because you're there for those big moments. And it's once you get a degree in this program or in any program really, in the broadcasting side, being a part of all of this stuff is really kind of cool. Like I said, I started when I was 14. Haven't worked a day in my life. I've done some cool stuff. I've worked some neat stuff, but I've never really worked a day. So that's kind of neat. I'm going to pull this here. Yep, I'm going to do that too. Pull a PowerPoint here for you guys because I have that ready to go. No, I don't. All right, let's see over here. Let's see. I can make this work.
While Rusty's pulling that up, I can speak a little bit on like the news side in regards to being able to create your own and putting it out there. I used to work at KCCI, and so when we would go out on location, we had the big van and there was a ton of equipment and there was other people that would go out on location and then, send it into the studio. But now with the change in technology and things like that, as a reporter, if you were to go out on location, it would literally just be you and the equipment, and you would be the one setting it up and covering the story live. And so even just that has changed drastically in regards to the news side and broadcasting.
And that's true. And nowadays, all you need to do is turn on any major network. And the crazy thing is with all this COVID stuff going on, the news person isn't necessarily the person standing in front of the microphone anymore or in front of the camera anymore. A lot of times now they've got to learn how to light their green screen behind them. They've got to know how to place the microphone on themselves. They've got to learn how to set up their cameras and where to set them at. They got to watch their backgrounds, so there's now all of a sudden the anchor has become the cameraman, has become the lighting person, has become the grip. So having as much of this knowledge as you can is a great thing. I know, with Michelle, that's kind of where things have gone,
The other thing too with social media and news reporters and anchors is you also have to brand yourself as a personality within those different platforms. Because if you go to a TV station and apply for a job as a reporter, one of the questions they'll probably ask you is how many followers do you have on social media? Because it's that popularity, that loyalty of those fans or those people that follow you that are going to follow you then to the next step or phase within your career. So social media is just as important, and branding yourself on social media as it is the way you present the news and figuring out the lighting and all of those things behind, which is why, you know, it is a big focus on in regards to social media too.
Absolutely. Here, I'm going to go ahead and share this with you real quick. And I'm just going to blast through this real fast. I know you guys kind of sitting there and it's been a while. We've been here a while. So, but we're going to talk about this here. If I can find the right button here. Where's that button at? Oh, it's underneath me. There we go. Okay. So anyway, just talking about broadcasting in general, that whole thing has changed now. It isn't just on your television or just on your radio anymore. It's now, you know, on your phone, on your computer. It's in your face all day long. But the broadcasting industry in the U.S. And the world has been responsible for providing news, entertainment, a lifeline for important disaster relief. Think about, you know, some of the hurricane stuff that's happened. How do people find out where they get their water? When's the power coming back on? And it's also provided some companionship. I know, you know, like my mother-in-law just can't. She waits for this one gentleman to come on air every day on the television. She just thinks he's the greatest thing in the world. And again, when he moved on and went somewhere else, she's now looking for him on social media. So, but currently there's more than 210,000 people working in the broadcast industry. Probably more than that now, actually, now that you've come into the internet world now. There's more than 30,000 broadcast stations in the United States. So that's kind of a neat deal. And places you can choose to work. You can actually choose to work at a television station, a TV studio, which is, you know, where Michelle has come from. You can choose to work in a radio station, which is where I've come from. Internet radio is huge right now. Also OTT TV, over the top television. That's those little apps that you purchase on your Roku or Fire or your smart TV or something like that. Those are OTT channels. Podcasting is absolutely enormous right now. So there's a ton of things that you can do in this industry now. And some of the major players in broadcasting, they're all over the place. Fox, ABC, iHeart, Pacific Media Group, Sirius XM. So it's enormous now. And I would actually throw on here Hulu, and Podbean and you know, iTunes. I mean, those are some great companies that you can work for in the broadcast industry. Some of the job titles that are out there, and Michelle, jump in if there's some. I just kind of roll. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
You could choose to work in management and administrative. You could choose to work in sales, support, and underwriting, engineering, technical, and computer work. Because now there's so much of it that's digital, and that's what's really cool about it. What's really neat is we're seeing, even with some of my students, they're coming up playing with these digital platforms. So they've already worked with this stuff, and we're just trying to integrate this new software into their lives. So they've got the skills. You've already got so many of these skills. You guys as high school students have already got so many skills when it comes to the technical and computer side. So that's kind of neat. Production and programming, and news. I mean, there's just so many things that you can do as far as opportunities for you in the industry. Let's see, in here, okay. Wages, it really kind of varies based on what you do. And I know Michelle can attest to this too. You know, you might decide that, you know what, hey, I love this radio thing and I love being part of my hometown, and I really don't want to move on. I just want to stay here. And okay, that's cool. You might make $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year doing that. You know, but you may decide, you know what, I want to go to New York. I want to be on top of the game. I want to be way up there. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to, start my career out that way. And you're going to end up making 230, up to, $300,000 a year. It just depends on where you end up. Some of the top executives are making more than that now. I think I heard the other day that one of the top executives from iHeart got a what was it, a $4 million bonus? It was just a bonus. It's just nuts. But there's extra benefits to this stuff too. A lot of times, you work for a radio station or a television station, they're kicking free t-shirts your way, free tickets. You get to go interview a band. Some of the cool stuff I've done, and I'll kick it over to Michelle and let her tell you some of the cool stuff about her. But I taught Miss America how to two-step, that was kind of cool. Yeah, she liked me too. She did. I know she did. I've raced go-karts. I've been in jet ski races, introduced major comedians that are, I think, all dead now, but just amazing, cool stuff that, I couldn't pay somebody to let me do, and they paid me to do it. That's what was really cool about it. So what's some of this cool stuff that you've done, Michelle?
Well, just meeting the different people that you get to interview, that you get to go and set up and talk to. But I also think, like, with this type of a career, it's not necessarily, which I think has been covered through all the other people that I've talked, it's not necessarily driven by money. It can be, but if you think that you're going to graduate and just all of a sudden be making a ton of money, that's not the case. But hopefully we're doing this because it's something that we absolutely love. And then, like you said, you can, move to a bigger market and make more money. But in either case, yeah, it's one of those things where if you really love what you do, it doesn't feel like work. And I think that's kind of the theme that everyone has talked about, and that I would agree with, that, you have the potential to make money, but you can't just assume you're going to graduate. You have to put in the work and make the moves too. So.
Yeah, and that's something that Jennifer touched on, and I can attest to that. Yeah, you give me $1 million. That's cool. That's fantastic. I love that. But if I hate what I'm doing, so what? I want to wake up every day and love what I do. That's what I want to do. And again, that's kind of where I come back to this part right here, the work environment. The dress code is going to depend on the position that you hold. If you're a camera operator doing NFL football games, tennis games, you're probably showing up in a t-shirt and shorts. You got your Metallica t-shirt on or whatever it happens to be. But if you happen to be working as an executive or something, you're going with a shirt and tie. So those things, and work schedules will also vary. Maybe, hey, look, I don't work on Sundays. That's just flat out what I won't do. Well, then I'd suggest not working for the NFL, because you're going to work Sundays. But the other cool thing about it is that's, probably the only real day of, I mean, there's more days of work, the prep and all that kind of stuff. But you're not working a normal 9 to 5. I mean, you can pick your schedule. Work settings will change all over the place. You can work in a television studio where, you're under the lights and it's a controlled environment. It's not hot. But if you're an outdoors person, man, you can get out there and become a camera operator for all kinds of different things, whether it's a photojournalist for a news company, or maybe it's a camera operator for a soccer team. So there's some really cool things that you can do. Your settings will change. You may need to work in different cities if your aspirations are that you want to make more money. It's just one of those things where you may have to start small and prove yourself and work your way up. Broadcasting's that way. It depends on, you can go as high up as you want to, as long as you've got the talent and the drive. And I think it's more the drive than anything else. Education requirements. Employers prefer to workers that have gained experience through internships or hands-on environment or involvement on school projects or degrees. Even AAS is kind of just one of the degrees that are out there. There's a lot of them out there that you could take. But having that experience and a degree is an amazing thing. So I encourage all of you, wherever you decide to go to school, find out if is it something that, you're going to spend 3 years sitting behind a desk or at a table listening to someone or talk to you about theory, or do you get an opportunity to grab a hold of the equipment, use it and do it? I can imagine, even with like Jennifer's courses and things like that, Jennifer could you imagine teaching a course in what you do and just giving them theory all day long? Don't touch a pencil or paint.
It'd be painful.
It'd be painful. And that's what you want. And I think as students in this industry, or even in any of these types of things that we do, the arts fields, we want to be hands-on. We want to be hands-on. We want to be doing this. So find out if the school that you're going to is allowing you to touch the equipment, touch the stuff, get in there and get your hands dirty and do it. Also, another thing is don't, and I think everybody else has talked to this a little bit too, don't just pigeonhole yourself into one place. Learn other things. Open yourself up. I can't remember who said this, but take as many other courses as you can. If you're interested in it, learn it. Learn more about it. Employers prefer that stuff. So in the journalism field or behind the screen, the camera, it's an amazing thing to be a part of. And like I said, I haven't worked a day in my life. So Michelle, do you have anything? I guess. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I think just kind of the same thing too is just say yes to opportunities. When I was in college, I did my bachelor's in journalism. I absolutely love to write. That's what I do. But my internship was making a movie. And that was something that I probably would have never said yes to. But I learned through mistakes that I had made that you need to, jump on every opportunity that's thrown at you. So you get those different experiences. And then you can take that and use that in other areas of your life. So I just think by saying yes, even to those things that may seem, out of the ordinary, make sure you take that opportunity to do that. And then just with the work environment and things like that, keep that in mind because it's not typically a 9-to-5 job. I worked both at the news. I worked both in the morning, and if breaking news happens at, 3 a.m, your cell phone's going off saying you need to get into the newsroom and cover this, or you have to go cover that live shot of that car accident that happened in the middle of the night. And if you're on camera, you got to look good for it. So I didn't last long on camera. If you seen me at 3 a.m, I decided to go behind the camera rather quickly. But it's one of those things where you go through and you make those changes based on your experiences. So definitely say yes to any opportunity.
And that's something else too. You may wake up and go, you know what? I don't want to be getting up. It's 3 o'clock in the morning and you're calling me up and this is horrible. I don't want to get out of bed, but you get there and the adrenaline kicks in. And all of a sudden, this is the coolest thing you've ever been a part of. And so that's why I say I've never worked a day in my life. Has it been rough to get out of bed? Absolutely. But I tell you what, when I'm there, man, I'm there. It's just cool. It's that adrenaline and you'll find it and it's really cool. So, do you have anything else to add, Michelle?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, I want to thank Michelle for everything there and thank all of you for being part of the Iowa Central Career Day podcast here with Rusty McNeil and everybody else here. Anyway, I'm sorry. I just had to do that again. I had to. So.
That was great. Thanks, guys. I know you probably can't see me laughing in my mask, but I was laughing. Okay, we actually have a few questions. And please write questions in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask. We love to hear your voice too. But a few of them that have been sitting here are for Rochelle. So the first one, how did Rochelle get started taking pictures? And at what point did she decide to venture into making it a business?
Well, good question. I guess how I first started taking photos, I was in high school. And like I had mentioned before, I'm a pretty extreme introvert, but I still wanted to be a part of things that were happening at school. And I still wanted to be around people. And I just didn't want to be the center of attention or talk. So I found that the camera was, that buffer between me and what was happening. And if I didn't want to converse in a conversation, but I still wanted to be around, then I just pull up my camera and I start taking photos. That's kind of how it started. And then I realized that that was just a really good communication tool for me. I'm not a very good speaker. That's not my forte. And it actually is a kind of an uncomfortable situation for me to be in. So using my camera to visually communicate was one of those tools that I found to be really helpful in, just my walk of life. And then once I realized that, I started to build a skill set for that and knew that I could use that to financially gain, then I decided that I would go to college for that. And then it wasn't until I moved back to Iowa about 10 years after I graduated from college that I opened the studio, because, and I tell my students this all the time, you really, really need to have a pretty strong background and skill level before you actually go out on your own to make a profit. Because, and also building up a clientele and working really hard and failing. There was a lot of failure that happened before I opened my studio also. Those are times that you grow. And so I always encourage my students, not to just go out and spend a bunch of money right away and open a storefront. Like, you actually need to work in the field for a substantial amount of time. So when I decided to move back to Iowa, that's when I decided to open my studio, because I connect with this part of the world the most, and this is where I feel most comfortable. And photographing people at that time for me was something new and just kind of a leap of faith. So I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, that was really good. Thank you. And then the next one is also for you. It was in a private chat. Let's see. Rochelle was talking about expressing your voice. How do you find your voice?
That's a loaded question. You find your voice by putting yourself out there and really experiencing things and, listening and trying new things. That was always a struggle for me, because I'm like, well, who am I really? And as an artist, how do I express myself? It's always that loaded question. And sometimes, putting yourself out there, like we had all mentioned, can be very terrifying, but it's also therapeutic as well. So you can kind of start working through who you are and through your work also. It changes too. My voice I have now is not the same voice that I had, when I was 18. There's an evolution to that. Just as with your work, how you perceive the world and how you connect with the world also changes over some time. And I had mentioned this before, the fear of failure often keeps people from producing work. My students will always ask, like, well, I just wasn't motivated to do that. I don't have the inspiration to do that. Well, you don't wake up one day and it's like, boom, here's your inspiration. That does not happen. It doesn't happen to any of us. You have to look for it, and you have to really foster that relationship with your, with your inner self. Like, this is what I'm going to give myself this goal today. And so I think, finding your voice is just something that you never really find it. It's not like, here's your voice and this is who you are for the rest of your life. It's ever changing. But really, honestly, how you do that is to create and put yourself out there.
Well, it looks like Kara wrote something really good in the chat too. Another private message that we received is about skills. So the students asking any of you that are comfortable answering, but if they were to come in to the Iowa Central program for any of you, if they had no skills or very little, but they enjoyed doing that, would you help them make them successful in the field? Or what would you do to help them be successful?
I think we all do that. We have a wide range of students who come in. I have students who already have their own website built and have been working for their own personal freelance for years. And then I have students who've never touched a digital camera, an SLR before. We meet them where they're at. And that's, I think, the great thing about Iowa Central with all of my colleagues.
Yeah, I'd like to say a little something too. I mean, because that's the thing. I've got students that have come in here and they've never even done a video on their phone. I mean, let alone, talking to a microphone, and they're real nervous and scared about that kind of stuff. But that's our job. our job is to help you learn those skills. And, one of the things I always tell my students is my job isn't just to help you find the skills. My job is to make you the best possible employee for your second job that I can.
Right, and you could think about it like maybe if you're a fantastic basketball player, why would you join like a very beginning level basketball group for amateurs or something? You want to, you learn in the classes, you learn the processes, and even if you start at level 0, that's okay. The people don't take drawing because they're already amazing drawers. And I'm sure it's the same way in broadcasting or whatever.
My programs are basically teaching students how to use software. So there's a lot of kids that had some experience, maybe taking a Photoshop class in high school or something. There's some kids that can barely turn on a computer. So we do start at level 0. And by the end of their first year, they're producing some pretty amazing advanced stuff in the software. So but we have all levels in all the courses that I teach.
Jacob, while I have you, we just had a question come in too, and Kenzie wrote it on the board for me, but somebody is wondering, does the college give you the program on the device, or do you have to purchase it yourself? Like, do you use the equipment there, or?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we do have an iMac lab. So we have iMac computers for students to use, but through the school, students are offered a personal device. And my program, among a few others that are here today, can upgrade to a MacBook Pro. So students have the opportunity for just a little bit more money. They can rent the MacBook Pro from the school, and it comes fully loaded with all the Adobe Creative Suite software on it.
And then another one we have is, what is your favorite, and this is for all of you, what is your favorite part about being in the career that you're in, or about your program? Like, what do you like to do best, basically? What's your favorite part? That's a loaded question too, but.
I guess for me, I love to see the growth of our students. But I'm just talking about like what I do now. I'm super passionate about photography. It's just part of who I am. And so being around other like-minded humans who, really want to explore that, I think is really quite great. And just to see that evolution from student work, and Jake kind of talked about that too, from when they join us into when they, leave and move on, that's really the most rewarding for me.
Yeah, same here. I love the fact to watch my students grow. I have one student in here that is graduating. He's just finished up his internship stuff just here a couple weeks ago. But when he first came in, he started here at Iowa Central taking radiology. Thought that was too hard, so he just thought, well, I'll drop the ology and I'll go into radio. So he did, and he just received here about 2 months ago. He just received the Best Editor Award from the Las Vegas Film Awards, because he's part of a movie that he got involved with, or a couple of different movies he got involved with down in Cedar Falls. So to see something like that, he walked in with no experience at all. Man, I tell you what, you talk about the adrenaline, that makes me feel good.
Anybody else on that question? If not, I have another one. Go ahead, Kara.
To say, I think we all feel that way. Since we're all in the education game, we all, get motivated when our students progress. One thing I do like on a personal note, though, is that I noticed when I started teaching drawing and painting, I started getting better at drawing and painting even myself. I feel like I learn new things about art all the time as an educator, which is just a really exciting thing for me. So.
I'm sorry, I totally missed the whole question. My baby sister just hurt herself and I was taking care of her. So could you please ask the question? Or
Yeah, that's okay. Hopefully she's okay. Yeah, so we were just talking about, see, now I'm gonna be sidetracked too, but no, I had asked what the instructors like most about their jobs and or like the career and or their positions. like their actual programs. So they were talking about their students and watching their students grow.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
I think from, you know, aside from the teaching part of it, you know, being a professional in that field, you know, creating something like someone comes to you, they have a business in mind and they need a logo. They need something that basically expresses who they are. And they don't know that what direction to go. They don't really know who they are. Then you come up with something, you come up with some concepts for them. They're like, yes, that's who I am. And then you develop that. That's a really rewarding feeling. And then seeing the clients that actually take your work and use it the way you intend it to, like they don't squish it and try to get it to fit on a certain item a certain way. Like I tell them, this is the way the logo is supposed to look. These are the colors it's supposed to be. And when they put it out there and they use it correctly, that you get that branding, you know, that makes me feel great. You know, I feel, you know, like I put that out into the world and they really embraced it. So that feels good.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. And if we don't get to your guys' questions, you can send them to Mackenzie or I, and we can always get them to the instructor. And at the end, in a couple of minutes, we're going to put the instructors, I guess, what is it? The information, the contact information and name, so you will be able to reach them. So one of the questions, which is a really good question also, is where do your students come from typically that enter your program, and where do they go? Where do you see some of them go to different states and get a job? Or if somebody has something cool to share like that, that will be our last question. But so whoever wants to share.
I would definitely say our classrooms are very diverse. We have students that are from Iowa, but because Iowa Central has such a strong athletic program, that tends to draw students from all over the world. I have students that are from Europe, from Africa, from Australia, all over the place. So the classroom is going to be really diverse. You're going to be with students that are definitely from the area. However, a good majority of them are not even from Iowa. So it's definitely a diverse campus, which is really cool, because I think it's good to surround yourself with people that grew up differently than you did, especially in a creative setting, because a lot of times you get to collaborate and you have discussions and things that you don't really get when you're sitting in a lecture hall. So it's really a cool atmosphere. And as far as where our students go, I mean, the sky's the limit. We have students that have gone all over the place in terms of their profession. Some have become professional artists that once were Iowa Central grads. Others have gone into art education. I know recently one of my students asked me, you know, how did you decide what you wanted to go into? And I said, well, it's because I liked so many different things. You know, I like to paint, I like to draw, I like working with ceramics, I love working with metal. I couldn't decide what I wanted to do every day. And so I decided to go into education. And she did the same thing. And she's at UNI right now. And her goal is to become a ceramics instructor. And so I think, you know, try to just figure out what you genuinely enjoy doing every day and can see yourself doing every day. But understand that that can definitely change too, you know, as your life happens. You know, what I kind of thought I was going to do on day one is definitely different from what I'm doing now. So, but yeah, we've got students that have gone all over. Rochelle has photography students that work as professional photographers. You know, they, do you want to share maybe, Rochelle? I know Stephanie Luth is in Colorado, originally from Fort Dodge.
Yeah, so she started actually by working as a photographer at a summer camp in Maine, and then now she's in Colorado and running her own business. But we also have some students who have freelanced as being a second camera shooter for many weddings and destination weddings. They've traveled, you know, to Mexico and into Cancun and places like that. We have a student, her name's Michaela actually, and she did a lot of social media classes as well. And she started working for a pretty prominent restaurant near Des Moines. And so she does all this social media work and all of the photography for this business and is pretty sought after now in working with social media platforms. So It really kind of depends. I also have a student who travels with a rodeo circuit, and she photographs rodeos all over the world as well. So there's many opportunities, especially if you love to travel. And if you don't, you just make your own opportunities wherever you're at.
Rochelle, is that restaurant Eatery A by any chance?
No, it's not. It's not. It's a barbecue place, and I can't read. And why I said near Des Moines is because I can't remember the name of it right off the moment. But yeah.
Well, I know Eatery A does a really good job with their social media with photography of the food and stuff. So.
All right, so thank you to our instructors who have taken the time and shared a lot of wonderful information. Kenzie and I have also learned a ton, which is really cool. So these are their contact information and their names. So if you want to take a picture or if you want to write it down, please do. I'm going to speak for the instructors and say don't hesitate to reach out to them because I'm sure they'd love to hear from you. And if not, you can always get a hold of us and we can get you in contact with them. Tours are a little tough right now, but we can try to get you in to have just a little view of their areas, maybe their programs, or just have one-on-one discussion with them again via Zoom or in person. We can try to get you connected any way possible that you're comfortable with. So so let us know if you have any other questions. Otherwise, thank you for attending our career day today. We appreciate it. And everyone take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.